Countries can be strange on many occasions. There are many different kinds of countries. And if we're gonna use the UN definition, which is biased towards hierarchical, hierarchy, centralized nation states, right, as the only form of legitimate form of government. So out of all these types of countries, you know, there are many different ways how you classify. The ones that are fully recognized UN member, there's around 100, 190 members. Maybe 200 depending how which one you count, which one you don't. There are like unrecognized states or non-state actors. What they meant by non-state is still technically a centralized hierarchical structure, and it's basically more accurate to call a proto-state, not an anti-state. That category gets smaller, smaller, smaller. And then you have sovereign nations that have no land whatsoever, but they're still technically counted as a country. There's only one country in the world that fits this description, the Knights of Malta. The Knights of Malta is basically a hospitalitao in the Catholic Church organization all the way back during the Crusades period, and has notorious for, despite doing their charity work and helping the poor, which is a good thing, but many of them are connected with the far right groups throughout history. More recent example towards fascism in the United States. We have many members who are very notorious, who are either members of it or who are allied with far-right fascist monarchist groups in the United States. A great article written by Jim Stowitzer, who did an essay article about this called Catholic Coup, JD Vance, PayPal Mafia, and Opus Diaz, and the Knights of Malta. And we're gonna read it today. The installment of JD Vance, a 39-year-old and I quote, hillbilly elegy as the GOP vice president candidate has generated significant question on both ends of the political stretching, for good reasons. With the fading conditions of Donald Trump and Trump's near assassination, it is clear that if the Republican Party seizes power again, there is a high likelihood Vance will become president of the United States. So why would Trump pick a junior senator from Ohio with a unique achievement of being the only vice president candidate in history to get a negative bump in popularity from exposure as a major party convention? The short answer is Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel and his longtime partner Robert and Rebecca Mercer founded J.D. Vance's Senate campaign in 2020. Thiel personally gave $50 million to Vance's Senate PAC around the same time. Vance and Thiel invested in a small Canadian video website Rumble, which has since evolved into a massive Russian propaganda distribution network, publicly traded by the NASDAQ. And is the guy behind this fascist movement, philosophically speaking, Curtis Jarvin, has pointed that Donald Trump is not the ideal like monarch that his CEO monarch is looking for the United States, but instead J.D. Vance. Just the year before, in 2019, J.D. Vance converted to Catholicism after being a self-described atheist who had convinced himself I was gay, quote unquote. He cited Peter Thiel as the reason for his radical change in ideology and for his religious conversion. Vance wrote that the most important event in time as a law student at Yale was taught by Peter Thiel in 2011. Vance became enhanced with Thiel's muse, French philosopher René Girard, who proposed a theory of mimetic rivalry, along with the idea of universal scapegoat myth. And also, this is the same vice president who publicly promoted a book called Inhumans, a book written by a neo-Nazi. Clear's theories are founded in the concept of mimesis, which postulates that apocalyptic violence in humans is the natural and viable consequence of society without religion, and that the only way to avoid this fate is theocracy. Peter Thiel says Girard's followers stand for a word cult-like. Girard's ideas were developed by Thiel and his acolytes in the concept of mimetics warfare as written in 2015 paper by Thiel venture capitalist. White nationalist Jeff Giza, who weaponized the meme, is the manager of the MAGA during the 2016 election, with Hillary Clinton as the scapegoat. Note: the collaborator with Thiel minion neo-Nazi Chuck Johnson, who is closely connected with Matt Gaetz. When Thiel asserted in 2009 that he no longer believes freedom and democracy are compatible, the same thing with Elon Musk as far back in 2008, who believed that democracy is unworkable, that he abandoned it, and cites women's suffrage as part of the reason. It's because he believes that Girard did that patriarchal theocratic autocracy is required for stable society. This echoes a J.D. Vance recent comment that children and women have no stake in the legend, and there are various quotes, like for example, and I quote, "I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible," according to Peter Thiel. To this end, Thiel and his allies include Russia and other foreign adversaries are conspiring for a group of elite Christian nationalists to impose a regressive theocratic vision of America by infiltrating and seizing control of the U.S. government. This Christian group is multidimensional, but Catholicism, with 2 billion followers, requires special attention. For many decades, a various strains of quote-unquote traditionalist Catholics have partnered with Americans and foreign and domestic rivals in a shared project to take control of the United States. This attempt by the Catholic traditionalist groups have been celebrated for a deliberate infiltration of the judiciary led by Leonard Leo, a member of Opus Dei and the Sovereign Order of Malta, aka the Knights of Malta, extremist Catholic cults which had traditionally functioned as long of the arms of the Vatican. Most of these groups have been stripped of official powers by Pope Francis in recent years, but it hasn't made them any less dangerous. Like great articles, like for example, Pope dissolves the Knights of Malta leadership, issues no constitution, written by Philip Pulela, and during the CNA article, Pope Francis changed canon law on Opus Dei and any future personal prelatuves. Leo installed two-thirds of the judges of the Supreme Court that we currently have, an organized crime ring working for theocrats and oligarchs masquerading at the highest court of the United States. 5 of Leo's handpicked justices are extremist Catholics. The last 2 years of the decision by Scotus had left no doubt that his purpose is not to interpret the Constitution but to shred it, especially to eliminate the Establishment Clause, the first 10 words of the Bill of Rights which guarantee freedom from religion. The founders especially designed the US government to prevent America from becoming a Christian nation again, which is the ultimate goal of the coup plotters. Fascists are acrobats of doves, legalizing machine guns 5 months before the election, making the president a king, and seizing massive amount of power for themselves is not behavior of a court. It's active designed by these extremists, Leonard Leo as a battering ram against the rights of the US citizen. It was recently revealed in the heritage head of the Project 2025 leader, Kevin Robert, who threatened the left with violence if you don't submit to his plan, has close ties with Opus Dei, in his words. This is very significant and very frightening. Another article that is written called Kevin Roberts, architect of Project 2025, has close ties to the radical group Opus Dei. Opus Dei is largely misunderstood as a group of wielders to whip themselves that has historically been close connection with fascist movements, historically speaking, especially in Spain with Francisco Franco. While it's true that some members are self-flagellated, it's been discouraged over the years. It was founded by Jose Maria Escriva under the fascist dictatorship Francisco Franco, who overthrew the young constitutional democracy during the Spanish Civil War and installed himself as a Spanish dictator for over 3 decades. Escriva was a member of the fascist Falanganist movement, who took job in the Francoist dictatorship. Escriva was also known to be a Nazi sympathizer and a Holocaust denier who supported Latin American fascist dictators like Augusto Pinochet and Alberto Fujimori. One of the people who lived with Escriva in Spain and learned under him was a young priest named Arnel Panula. After Escriva's death, as head of the Opus Dei house at the Stanford University in the 1980s, Panula, then in his mid-40s, met a young gay undergraduate student who was the president of the Federalist Society. His name was Peter Thiel, and they remained close friends until Panula's death. Palula went on to head the Opus Dei in America and ran Opus Dei's K Street Lobby Catholic Information Center and founded the theocratic Leone Forum. Leonard Leo was on the board of both the CIC and the Leone Forum. Opus Dei has been associated with numerous illegal operations, including worst spies in American history. Opus Dei's member and FBI agent Robert Heston, who stole documents and passed them to GRU, Russian military intelligence agency, for many years. And at time, an Opus Dei's member, Juanqui Navarro Valls, who previously lived with Escria and Panula, was the official spokesman of the Vatican with the office just feet from the Pope John II, who made fascist theocrats Sia Escria a saint. And again, Robert Heston, a member of Opus Dei and the head of the FBI, is considered by the Department of Justice as possibly the worst intelligence disaster in U.S. history. The FBI director, when Hussein was caught, Luis Fresh, was also an Opus Dei member, who was fired by Bush and went out to represent Russian oligarchs. While Opus Dei denied that Bill Barr is a member, he spoke to the CIC and has numerous connections with Opus Dei operatives over the years, who are embarking on a decades-long career of covering up criminal conspiracies. For example, Bill Barr covered up the Iran-Contra affair for Bush as Attorney General and diverted public attention away from crimes of Ronald Reagan and the former OSS officer Jack Sinclair and Mike Flynn's mentor, who has been deeply involved. His father, Donald Barr, notoriously also a former OSS officer, gave a young unqualified Jeffrey Epstein his first job with access to kids at private schools. When Bill Barr was hired by Trump, he unrescued himself from an Epstein case and took it over. Jeffrey Epstein ended up dead in prison after a series of mistakes by the DOJ. Bill Barr intentionally misrepresented the Mueller report and destroyed any chance of justice for the theft of 2016 election by Russian government and American collaborators. This last part I'm not big fan of because although there's a lot of connections with Trump and Putin over the years, but it was also gerrymandering, which Trump lost the popular vote in 2016 but won the electoral college, which basically was rigged. This happened only 4 times in American history where they stole the election by gerrymandering using the Electoral College. There's also Jack Sinclair, who wrote a letter to Bill Barr on behalf of Dame of Malta's Phyllis Skiffless, Eagle Forum, in February 2020, advocating for Mike Flynn. Bill Barr tried felony charges on Flynn 3 months later. Remember, Michael Flynn was a three-star general, a lieutenant general who participated in the January 6th insurrection attempted coup. There's also Jack Sinclair was a notorious anti-communist who founded the American Future nonprofit organization in 1946 because he thought the wrong side won the war in World War II. Sinclair was also involved in many illicit activities that helped to create the John Birch Society, Western Goals, and the World Anti-Communist League, which were all neo-Nazis, anti-communist organizations aiming to return America to its quote-unquote Judeo-Christian values. Sinclair was also deeply connected to the Knights of Malta, gifted American Future to Michael Flynn before his death in 2021. The Knights of Malta, there was less than 15,000 of them worldwide, but has official diplomatic relations with more than 100 countries, has permanent observer seat at the UN, and operates as its own quasi-nation state. It considers itself a group of spiritual warriors still fighting the crusade while pretending to be a benevolent international charity. However, its charity work has been plagued with accusations of pedophilia, child trafficking, and more recently in Ireland. An article written by the Irish Times called Order of Malta, board disbanded as follow over child sex abuse, the controversy deepens. Written by Jack Powell. The Knights of Malta is descended from the Hospitalitars, who were supposedly to be humanitarian arms of the Christian Crusades, which were really bands of violent lunatics roaming around Europe trying to eliminate Muslims and Jews, thousands of years ago. Now it's not the same, but they are often conflated with the Knights Templar, even though they're two different organizations. And there are surprising number of spiritual organizations that claim the Knights of Malta is an official Vatican-approved operation. And here are the confirmed members of the Knights of Malta. We have Eric Prince of Blackwater, who want to install his own illegal military dictatorship in Venezuela. We also have Paul Brecken, who was also a member of Blackwater. We also had Joseph Schminkes, who is the Defense Department IG, which is also a Blackwater member. We have William Casey, who was the director of the CIA for Ronald Reagan. Alexander Haig, who was the Secretary of State for Ronald Reagan. William Donovan, who was the founder of the OSS, which is and the co-founder of the CIA. Leonard Leo, a member of SDS, and a Federalist Society who works closely with Trump, who extols 6 Scottish justices. We also have the Phyllis Classic, who is the member of the Michael Flynn family. We also had, you know, General Stanley McChrystal, a 4-star general, who was critical of Trump. We also had Cardinal Raymond Burke, who has close connection with Steve Bannon. We also have Franz von Papen, who was a Nazi who gave Hitler rise to power. Jimmy Savile, who is a convicted predator. And we also have Saad Abad, a U.S. Chancellor of the Knights of Malta. And we have video from 2010 by Keith Olbermann describing every Prince connection to Christian national groups, including the Knights of Malta and the Council for National Policy. Prince Blackwater terrorist organization under the direction of Mike and Charles Flynn, commanded by Christopher McClay, murdered Muslims for sports. In 1991, Eric Prince, whose parents were both past presidents of the CNP, was integrated into Congressman Dana Rohrabacher's office, where he met Paul Brehens, Rochester's chief of staff, who was a nice Malta. Eric Prince, like G. D. Bench, converted to Catholicism the next year. In 1992, Rosenberg became the most reliable pro-Putin congressman, and Brennan became a notorious international operative who died just before January 6, a blunt force head trauma. Opus operative Pillbar was good friends with the Nisamoto Casey, Reagan CIA director, who also founded the racist propaganda organization, the Manhattan Institute, as well as Dame of Malta, Phyllis Seshloff, a female knight, who was an anti-feminist, anti-communist, anti-abortion activist, partnered with Mike Flynn's mother, Helen, to take away women's rights in the 1960s and 70s. We also had Jack Sinkler promote Phyllis Shifless from American Future for the 80s and 90s, while he was executed Iran-Contra. Most recently, Mike Flynn, who used America's future to launder money for big lie fraudsters, mobilized QAnon or its conspiracy theories. And if the Phil amicus priest was quoted to legalize machine guns and make the president a king, which successfully did. This 1985 document of the CIA FOIA archive is relevant to describe the cooperation of the Nice Malta, the OSS, and Nazi Germany in World War II, and the subsequent cooperation of Reagan's CIA under the Nice Malta within Casey to execute Iran-Contra. Jack Sinclair was involved in both illegal operations for 4 decades apart. As noted, Trey Troy on Twitter in a covert action was a KGB-aligned operation designed to attack the CIA, which was not a monolith. The information in the document should have seen in the context. However, the secretary approved for everything quoted from in this article called Covert Operation Information Bulletin Number 25, Special Nazis, the Vatican, and the CIA. In 1943, the OSS wanted Roosevelt to make Nyssa Malta Nazi Franz von Papen to become post-Hitler Führer, a request denied by Roosevelt, who demanded the OSS to stop communicating with the Nazis as soon as he found out, which they still did. The OSS includes Singapore and Donald Barr, and the CIA worked with Nyssa Malta to infiltrate Nazis from Germany to work with the United States and escape to other countries. 70 years later, the Nyssa Malta has been used rationale for mass murder by a number of neo-Nazi terrorist groups, including Andres Perret, who murdered 80 people in Norway in 2011, and Brenda Tarrant, who slaughtered 51 Muslims in Christchurch in New Zealand back in 2019. Brewer claimed they had been organized by the Nyssa Malta for his massacre, although that would be considered form of mental illness. There's a Tarrant whose several symbols especially connected with the Nyssa Maltas and his weapons. And there's been a schism within the Vatican Church between the Knights of Malta and Pope Francis, who excommunicated many members. And to those who still maintain work with fascist monarchist organizations, especially in the United States. For example, Vigano, one of the people who got excommunicated, worked with Knights of Malta, Raymond Burke, and Steve Bannon, who tried to set up a fascist paramilitary training camp in a monastery in Italy. Peter Thiel justifies adoption of renegade law as a rationale for blaming God and attempting to impose radical theocracy in the form of for our own good is a consequence with the narcissistic tendency among the papal mafia. So unlike the Nazi Germany's conception of positive Christianity, this one probably is even more dangerous. And we have to be careful with the danger going on with this ongoing coup. And now they have their own Christian task force to suppress unchristian activities in the United States.